And good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Prince Hall Think Tank, a monthly conversation amongst Prince Hall Freemasons where we discuss topics relative to craft masonry. My name is Brother Antonio Caffey, and I'm a very proud past master of St. Mark's Lodge Number 7, located in Columbus, Ohio, where presently the worshipful Brother Royston Snowden serves as most worshipful master. My lodge was granted a charter in the year 1852 by the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Ohio, where currently the Honorable Robert Estelle serves as Most Worshipful Grand Master. Before I let the other brothers introduce themselves, I would like to state that the views and opinions expressed by us this evening in no way reflect the views and opinions of the lodges and Grand Lodges in which we hold membership in. Also, if you have not already done so, please make sure that you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can stay up to date with all things Think Tank. As always, if you have any questions during the presentation this evening, go ahead and use the chat option. And if we have time near the end of the show, we'll make sure we answer some of those questions. At this time, I'll let the brothers introduce themselves, starting with Brother Gillarm.
All right. Good evening. My name is Brother Dave Gillarm, proud past master of the Mount Pisgah Lodge number 53, located in Columbus, Georgia, where Royline Allen serves as our worshipful master. I also have the pleasure of serving as the worshipful grand historian of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia, while Honorable Primus T. James serves as our Most Worshipful Grand Master. As always, it's a pleasure being with you all. Look forward to next season, and y'all already know what time it is.
Thank you, Dave. Next up, Brother James Morgan.
Good evening, everyone out there in the Prince Hall Think Tank universe. This is Past Master James R. Morgan III coming to you from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. I'm a proud past master of Corinthian Lodge number 18 and have the honor and privilege of serving as the worshipful grand historian of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia, where the Honorable Anthony B. Corbett serves as our Most Worshipful Grand Master. Season's greetings, happy holidays to everybody. I am going to take just a quick dose of executive privilege and just say that I'm also now a past high priest in the Royal Arch. God is good. And if I just keep on breathing for another 20 days or so, I'm also going to have another master's degree. And I'm not talking about, I already got the Master Mason degree, but we talking about that Master of Arts degree, graduating with a 4.0 from Morgan State University. And I want to thank you all so much for your support, your prayers, and everything in between. My master's thesis is right here. It has actually been approved, thank God. And I want to give a shout out to my brothers in the Prince Hall Think Tank because I dedicated my master's thesis to you all and to the wonderful people here at the Prince Hall Think Tank universe. Love you all. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Brother Morgan, and congratulations on those honors, good brother. And next up, our Damien Jack.
Good evening, all. Brother Damian Jack, proud past master of Paul Dre and Lodge number 7 here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where worshipful brother Malcolm McClendon serves as our worshipful master. Our lodge is a constituent lodge under the auspices of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of North Carolina, where the Honorable Daniel L. D.T. Thompson serves as our 24th Most Worshipful Grand Master. As always, it is an honor and a pleasure to be before you this evening. We hope you have enjoyed this Thanksgiving weekend and start to the holiday season. Enjoyed a lot of family, food, football, and fun. And thank you, and of course, giving your time to come this evening. And we hope you enjoy the episode.
Thank you, Brother Jack. And our special guest this evening is Right Worshipful Mario Powell, who serves as the Deputy Grand Master for the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Ohio. Right Worshipful Powell, thank you for joining us this evening. You can give a brief introduction, good brother.
Thank you, Brother Caffey and all. Good evening. I am Mario D. Powell, a proud past master of Eureka Lodge number 52, located in Cleveland, Ohio, where Ronald Jordan serves as our worshipful master. We are a subordinate lodge to the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the state of Ohio, where the Honorable Robert M. Estelle Jr. serves as our 66th Most Worshipful Grand Master. Good evening to all.
Thank you, brother Right Worshipful Powell, for joining us this evening. And again, thank you all for joining us and sharing your time, as Brother Jack had mentioned earlier. So tonight, we're honored to have Right Worshipful Powell join us to discuss the current project that the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Ohio is undertaking. You know, next year, the Grand Lodge will be celebrating 175 years and the history of the Grand Lodge, which we've chronicled on the Think Tank before, and the role that it's played in advancing Prince Hall Freemasonry in America has been chronicled in previous books. However, a new book is currently being worked on. And Right Worshipful Powell, again, thanks for joining us. And he's going to tell us a little bit about that particular project. So, Right Worshipful Powell, what exactly sparked the idea to write or chronicle a new history for the Grand Lodge?
Yeah, great question. So a few things actually sparked the idea. The first of which is a project that I started on back in 2017, 2018, maybe, which is a history book for my local lodge. Our lodge has a quite complicated history, if you will. We were chartered in 1855, actually rechartered in 1869 under Pennsylvania, and then rechartered in Ohio again in 1884. So I've been diligently working on a project that essentially got tabled for just a little while. I actually slipped up at that time and told my big brother, the Honorable Robert M. Estelle Jr., at that time that I was working on such a project for my lodge. And he started putting the math together pretty quickly to understand that we would be celebrating 175 years during his administration. I honestly figured he'd forget after a few years, but I didn't help those efforts when back in 2020, 2021, I actually served my local OES chapter as worthy patron. And during that time, the then worthy matron, Sister Dee Dee Howell, actually assembled a committee to put together a committee as our local chapter was celebrating 100 years. So that committee, led by myself, put together a 100-year history book simply titled Her Story, Bethel Chapter number 58. From there, before we even got done with that, the then Right Eminent Grand Commander John Waters of the Ohio Prince Hall Grand Commandery actually put in a request because our Grand Commandery was coming up on its 150th year. Unfortunately, Right Eminent Past Grand Commander Waters was called from labor to refreshment before that book came out, but we hope that that book did him justice as it was dedicated in his name. So when Robert M. Estelle Jr. was elected this past August as our 66th Grand Master, I think before the gavel had fully sounded throughout the city of Columbus, he kind of looked at me and gave me the nod that it's official. We are going forward with the 175-year book. So that's really kind of what sparked the entire thing, was the alignment of the date. It just happens to fall on the first weekend in May, which is when the book will officially be released.
Okay, so this is it had been, thought of as far as a project for a while. It wasn't just, hey, let's do this. You had put some good thought into this. So what's been what process have you used to compile the information that you gathered?
Yeah, so the process has been quite extensive, so I really can't take credit for it at all. I have to give kudos to Past Master Roderick Q. Blunt of Samaritan Lodge, number 117, who also serves as the Grand Thrice Illustrious Master, Brother Reginald Stewart of Ecclesiastes, number 120, who is the Grand Historian, I believe, for the Ohio Council Deliberation, and also a familiar name, Past Master Antonio Caffey of St. Mark's Lodge, number 7, who serves Ohio as our Grand Historian. But these brothers assisted in the creation of the sesquicentennial book for the Grand Commandery, and really the process began before we actually completed that process. So as we were researching, going through the proceedings for the Grand Commandery, Grand Lodge, newspaper articles, local articles, historic societies, we actually started putting together and compiling information to put together the blueprint of this book before that book was even put down. And it's really been important to us that we were not just regurgitating, if you will, the history of Ohio. The history of Ohio is pretty well written, starting with the 1906 book, from the 1960 book. We had another one in 1970. We also had one, I believe, in 2013 that was under the administration of uh, Bob Jones, and when he was serving as Grand Master. So we were really trying to put together some things and make sure that we had enough content that was not just regurgitating that. We were actually bringing everyone up to speed, closing the gaps on some things, and also presenting new information, because in my humble opinion, 175 years is really no small feat for any organization to survive through. So I think we still got a lot to say.
Yeah, so you had said, like, right, so 175 years, that's a lot of years. So how did you find that balance in, um, you know, not looking at those three previous books that had been published about the Grand Lodge? Like, how did you make sure that this wasn't just a retelling of those old stories, that it would be something new besides those those new years that last book may not have covered?
Good point. So, we will actually pull and reference some of the information from that, but we are also presenting new information. One is we're presenting and updating the bios of all of our most worshipful past Grand Masters. So the last book was put out in 2013. So it's been about 10 years since then. We have obviously a few brothers that have served as Grand Masters within this jurisdiction that is not up to date. There's also some just additional, in this day and age with technology, there's so much at the fingertips of each of us. I think we can add additional content on those past grandmasters, but we're also providing the histories of all of our subordinate lodges. So that is one thing that we noticed in the previous book. They may list where the lodge was chartered, but it really doesn't go into much detail about that lodge's history. Another thing that we're touching on is the lodges outside of the state of Ohio that Ohio has actually chartered. Ohio has chartered about 43 lodges outside of the state of Ohio, and 11 different states from Indiana, Kentucky, just to name a few of those that are adjacent, all the way to some that are a little bit further out from Louisiana, Alabama, Missouri. So we're also giving the information on those to show, one, that Ohio did charter lodges in those states until their Grand Lodges formed, but also to just provide some additional information. The other thing that we're doing in this particular book that we think is something a little bit different. So Ohio is set up in 7 districts throughout the state. One of the things that we notice is a lot of times, I'm here in Cleveland. If you're in Columbus, you're in Cincinnati, those are really some of the more popular cities, if you will. What we're doing is also presenting and highlighting a lot of the prominent members that have been a part of this jurisdiction, be it from the major cities. Like I said, Cleveland, you got brothers like Garrett Morgan, who was a member of Excelsior Lodge number 11. He was a famous inventor. You got Perry B. Jackson, who was the first Black judge of Ohio. John P. Green, who was and is considered the father of Labor Day here in the state of Ohio. But then in some of the smaller cities, like Greenville, Ohio, you have Frederick D. Patterson of Cedar Grove Lodge number 17. He was, along with his father, was one of the first Black auto manufacturer makers here in the U.S. You also have people like Arthur J. Riggs of Champion Lodge number 15, who was amongst the brothers that actually started the Elks amongst the colored people. So we're really trying to highlight some additional brothers in the state and elaborate on some of the histories throughout the lodges.
Excellent. And you know what? And what makes that interesting is if you going back to the verse, the 1906 history book, and how it was written, and it's one, you know, out of, I don't know, I'm a little biased. Like out of all the history books that have been written about the Grand Lodge, I think that's one of my favorites because they had those bios in there about some of the early brothers, and it's really interesting how it was written in regards to, like, they definitely told the story of the Grand Lodge and how it was created, but then they also made sure that you knew about the men that did the work as well, and not just what they did in masonry, but the role that they played within, you know, the history of Ohio as well. So it's nice to see that, you know, that's going to be discussed and talked about, or, you know, that is going to be, you know, used to update that information as well, because, you know, as you know, some of the names that you stated, and as well as some of the names that some people will see within the history book, it's going to be a wow, I didn't know that person was, you know, not only a member but belonged to our Grand Lodge as well.
Yes, sir.
So that so, but besides the new, you know, chronicling that history, are there any other, I guess, tidbits that you may have discovered that you want to share, or you want to wait until waiting, you know, for it to come out in the book, or just little teasers maybe?
Yeah, I got some teasers. I think, you know, one of the biggest things that I think for me personally, as we research history, is always trying to put yourself back in that frame of mind, right? So when you think about brothers like past Grandmaster William T. Boyd, you know, I read something that said when masonry first became a thing in the state of, or black masonry, if you will, first became a thing in Indiana, he went from Lafayette to Indianapolis, and that was a 60-mile trip. You know, in the current times, we don't really think of 60 miles as that big of a deal. I mean, that's, you know, one tank trip, if you will, there and back. But it actually stated that he took that trip, and it took him a full day to actually take that journey from horseback to train to walking. And that to me just shows the importance of what it meant for him to become a part of the organization. You know, there's a lot of times we have to actually piece together a lot of the things. So when referring to some of the proceedings and things, you may have to look in this proceeding and connect the dots to this proceeding. And what we're trying to do is really bring transparency to some of those things. Kind of going back to what you just said about the 1906 book, I agree and echo those sentiments. That's probably my favorite book that we've been able to put together, because it does show the histories. It doesn't just show the general history, but it gives us a better glimpse into who these brothers were, what was their impact, not just to society, but to our organization, and how did we continue to bring things forward. You know, Ohio has a very rich history from brothers like Samuel W. Clark, who, you know, I didn't realize until I started doing a little bit more research. He's the only Grand Master in Ohio that actually served 2 terms. He served twice, almost back to back. Jeremiah Brown actually served in between him. Jeremiah Brown actually happened to be the Grandmaster that served the longest term. But there's some tidbits that we'll give in there. Samuel W. Clark, for example, he was 33 years old when he was first elected to the position of Grandmaster. You know, those are things that are told in the 1906 book, but you almost have to do the math because it doesn't really call it out. And believe it or not, at the age of 33, he still was not the youngest Grandmaster in the state of Ohio. E.A. Fulton actually owns that title, as he was elected at the age of 30. So there's going to be a lot of different things that we're going to be putting out there, because there's a lot of prominent brothers. In my opinion, I'm kind of biased because I'm born and raised in Ohio, and you know, I think we again have a lot to say. There's a lot of brothers from Thomas W. Stringer to Richard Gleaves and Corey Adams, you know, just to name a few of the legends, if you will, in the Masonic order. that I think we can elaborate and tell a little bit more about. Again, the amount of information that's at our fingertips now, it always amazes me every time I open up the computer. I'm always kind of geeking out about it because I can get lost, as I'm sure most of you can, for a couple hours, and you look up like, man, I got stuff to do. So we're really trying to bring a lot of that information and those tidbits to things. I mentioned William T. Boyd, and he's always been pretty close to my research. As some of you may know, there's a lodge here in Cleveland, William T. Boyd, number 79, that was named in his honor. And, he was one of the founding members of my lodge, Eureka Lodge number 52, or back then we were number 14. So he was actually one of the founding members of that lodge, and then went on to charter Excelsior Lodge number 11 here in the city of Cleveland, which was actually chartered the day after Juneteenth. So it's doing things like that. Like literally, he that lodge was chartered the day after Juneteenth, 1865. So when you start doing the math on stuff like that, and you start recognizing people in certain areas, brothers, new brothers, older brothers don't realize some of the legends, if you will, that have been a part of their roster. So we're trying to call out some of that stuff and really bring to light some of the prominent brothers that have move things forward. Hopefully that wasn't too long-winded, but
No, and I think you raise a good point too, because I think sometimes people will ask the question, well, if the history of the Grand Lodge or a lodge or anything, it's already been written. Why? I guess do it again. And you hit on the head when you said modern technology. Like modern technology now allows you to go back and relook at certain things with context or more context. We have more things I think now at our disposal than brothers may have had back then. And we also have the benefit of hindsight. How did some of those things that they did back then impact us today? So it's using that context to go back, relook at those things, re-examine, and then offer some other viewpoints on it, some fresh viewpoints on it, as far as the impact and everything. So I appreciate that. I just appreciate the brothers that they're putting the time in, because one, I think those brothers that started and formed our respective Grand Lodges and lodges deserve that. They deserve to have their stories continuously, researched, and told and updated for a new generation of members as well. So, I'm sure other Grand Lodges are doing the same, and other brothers are doing the same as we relook at things. I know personally, with my individual lodge's history, and I just rediscovered something. Well, not rediscovered. I just discovered something a few years ago that, like you said, you start putting the pieces together. Like, man, okay, if this happened, now I need to go look at this differently and do a little more research on that. Everything builds on each other, and it's one of those things where, like you said, you can get lost in it, and again, you hit on the head. You look up, and before you know it, you can spend 2-3 hours reading, either a proceeding, a document, or something, and either a spouse, child, or somebody's calling you, like, hey, what have you been doing for these past 2-3 hours? But only those that have done it can appreciate it.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I do have a question. I guess I'm gonna preface this with a statement. And this is directed to Right Worship Powell. From the amount of research that you did, you saw that Ohio seemed like a nucleus, with chartering lodges in Indiana and Kentucky and Louisiana and so on and so forth all over the globe, all the United States. And even the lodges that Ohio didn't directly charter, they were responsible for, such as Bradwell Lodge number 4 in Columbus, Georgia. St. John's Lodge number 3 in Cincinnati was directly responsible for that because the first 3 members of that lodge were raised in St. John's. Um, so, what do you think it was that made Ohio like the nucleus? Why like they were able to spread so far, help spread Prince Hall Masonry so far in the United States?
I'd say the one thing is it seemed like the brothers were really traveling men in every sense of the word, right? I mean, when I think about back in the 1800s and pre-automobile, it's kind of hard for me to even fathom what did transportation back then look like, right? I can just jump in my car and drive down to DC or drive to Mississippi or somewhere. I had to take a train and do things. When I look in the proceedings and I see that there were actual grand sessions for Ohio held in other states, which kind of blew my mind away, because at the time those states had lodges that owed allegiance to Ohio. So you go back to like 1855 when the grand session was actually held in Indiana. It was also held in Chicago and St. Louis in the 1860s. So to me, to answer that, it seemed like Ohio brothers just were not afraid to travel. Not that other brothers were, but it seemed like once Masonry hit Ohio, it was like, let's continue to spread this great thing to the West, and that's kind of how I draw the connect the dots, so to speak.
And piggybacking off of
Brother Powell. I'm sorry.
ahead,
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Jack. Brother Powell. So I'm glad you mentioned Ohio spreading to the West. I was curious to know, as the viewing audience may know, a few years ago I was able to put out my own book about Prince Hall Masonry in the West and in Kansas, and Ohio played a major role in the establishment of Masonry in Missouri and in Kansas as well. But that also leads into the politics of the National Grand Lodge versus the Independent Grand Lodge movement in the 19th century. I'm curious to know, in your research, have you all come across any new information concerning that element? I know you mentioned a little bit of the history of your lodge, kind of changing allegiances back and forth. Did you get any new insights into that discussion?
Yeah, so the National Grand Lodge is always a complicated endeavor. I mean, full transparency, that's where my lodge actually went back under the state of Pennsylvania in 1868. We actually at the time held a charter in Ohio, and then we also held a charter in Pennsylvania, which resulted in our charter in Ohio being revoked. And we still operated from 1868 through 1884 under the jurisdiction of Pennsylvania. And the National Compact actually chartered additional lodges. You had Light of the West, which was also here in Cleveland, Davis Lodge in Youngstown, Ohio. There was also a few more that the National Compact had actually created and warranted charters for. So we do have some information. The National Compact always, I think that by itself could be an entire book, because every time I go down that particular route, I get lost for like 2 weeks, and literally just like trying to put pieces together and trying to understand, again, selfishly why my lodge chose to kind of go under Pennsylvania at the time. I think naively that they felt like, there at the time we had 2 Grand Masters that had served in Ohio that had went on to serve the National Grand Lodge, but William T. Boyd was pretty adamant against the National Compact, and all of the research that I've found and come across, he was very vocal about the compact was not the correct thing for Masonry. And as a result, in 1868, I believe, is when we severed our ties in Ohio with the compact, and we kind of moved on. My lodge again, as a result, stuck with it and kind of licked our wounds and came back in 1884. But still operating and continuing to continue the craft of Masonry from there.
Yeah, that's interesting, right, Worshipful, because my lodge, the same thing, literally the same thing. We had a vote on whether or not, and I think I did the history of my lodge on, doing the think tank episode, but we had a vote on whether we should remain with the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Ohio, or apply for membership under the Pennsylvania Compact Lodge. The lodge voted to stay in Ohio, but our three principal officers decided that we should go with the with the Compact Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. So they actually stole our charter and went and chartered and started another lodge up the street, and we had to reapply to the Grand Lodge for a brand new charter. And it was interesting. I remember when I first came in the lodge, I never understood why the copy that we had on our wall in St. Mark's Temple didn't have the names of our original three principal officers. And it wasn't until many years later when that was brought to my attention, I like I said, you figure something out. So I think, and again, it's going to be really interesting how when we talk about, the National Grand Lodge, the Compact, and different things like this, it's going to be interesting how when we get down the road, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years from now, how that story is going to be told with further research, and not necessarily, research to try to justify or anything like that, but these interesting stories, how it wasn't as easy. I think sometimes people think that it was an easy decision to say, that it came up and it popped up, and we're not gonna, it's illegitimate, it's wrong, we shouldn't do it. And from research that I've done, I think that you've done too, it was a lot more nuanced and a lot of debate. I think a lot of brothers saw it more. They introduced, or they looked at it from the lens of racial unity, and that's what kept it going a lot of times, because Prince Hall Freemasonry from day one, it was under attack from outside. So they viewed it through that lens of and given everything else that was going on in America to begin with during that time period too. I think they viewed it through the lens of race, and it was a difficult decision, I think, for some people to make. But like you said too, I think it was difficult for everyone except Boyd. Like you said, Boyd he was adamant, like, nope, nah, not having it. So, Brother Jack, you had something?
Yes. So right words for Powell. Just listening to the information that you're providing this evening. I'm very intrigued just on Ohio's history alone and its impact on Prince Hall Masonry as a whole, just by certain names that you pointed out. You pointed out, Richard Gleaves, who was, the National Grand Master at the time that my Grand Lodge was actually established. Thomas Stringer, who went from Ohio to Mississippi, and even bringing up Garrett Morgan, who I did not know until I was today years old and finding out that he was a Prince Hall Mason. So just seeing the impact that Ohio has had on Prince Hall Masonry as a whole. I know a couple of years ago when we did our episode on Royal and Select Masters, and Dave and I diligently did that research, and Dave pointing out that that Royal and Select Masters, as far as Prince Hall is concerned, after doing much digging in history, where we are now with Royal and Select Masters, they originated in Ohio. What would you say for you would be your top three proudest moments of what Ohio has done in this history up until now?
Oh man, that's a good question. So I would selfishly say one would be severing ties from the National Compact and really helping to lead that charge. And now as I overstand Masonry in my latter days, if you will, I too strongly feel like that was not the way to go. So I think that would be one of the first things that I'm probably most proud of Ohio doing the second, and not to go too deep. I mean, I also serve as the thrice illustrious master of Anaheim Council #1 for a couple more weeks, and the brothers have told me that they are. I've already informed them that I'm not seeking re-election, but brothers like Charles E. Gordon, who was the first Grand Thrice Illustrious Master for Council. I mean, I think for me, the things that I'm most proud of is just Ohio being always willing to continue to push things forward. Thomas W. Stringer being a part of several different jurisdictions. We actually have his bloodline here in Cleveland still, with a brother in William T. Boyd Lodge. I think it's his fourth great grandson. But my most proudest moments in Ohio's history, it would be severing our ties from the National Compact, starting the leeway for the Grand Council and the Royal and Select, and also just some of the history that we've been able to put together from brothers like Corey Adams and Jeremiah Brown, and just being able to kind of lead the way on some of those things. I think I'm just proud of the amount of brothers that we've had, and perusing the archives, you can see that these brothers were not shy about masonry, right? They were not shy about getting out there and traveling. They were not shy about voicing their opinion and their dislike for things. And I mean, just men doing men things, right? When I look at some of these things, and I realize that in the early days, it's a little bit different from what it is now. Most of the time I talk to some of the younger folks, if you will, and they're like, man, this is like a grandpa sport. But then when you look at the early days of masonry, you see the ages on some of these brothers, you realize that most of these brothers were in their 30s, in their 40s at the most, and they were not shy about continuing to push things forward. So I think the thing that I'm most proud of is just Ohio having the tenacity to continue to put masonry first, and to make sure that we're moving things forward. That's probably the thing that I'm the proudest of the most from Ohio.
And so it may not be in this history book coming up, but I'm sure in the next history book coming up, maybe 10, 15 years down the line, or when it's celebrating the 200th anniversary, we know we're going to have to add past Master Antonio Caffey's name to that list, just for the creation of what we're on now, and this spawning out of Ohio, and what it has done for Prince Hall Masonry as a whole. So when the question comes, why do we continue to rewrite history books? Because history is constantly being made every single day. So and whether we know it or not, we're a part of history. So this will be another notch on Ohio's belt when the next history book comes out.
You know what, Brother Jack? I would like to second that motion. I think that I'm not a member of the jurisdiction of Ohio, but I think maybe one day they might even erect a statue to past Master Caffey somewhere at the appropriate place, with him pointing to the east. Of course, I can see it now. Yeah, no, definitely my hat's off to you, brothers, man. I'm glad to see that the jurisdiction of Ohio is maintaining this and improving upon this history that you all have of writing. Down here in the District of Columbia, we've taken to calling ourselves the home of writers, because our jurisdiction also has a very long history of writing, in the past as well as in the present. But there's something I wanted to add on to this discussion that actually connects DC and Ohio in a very interesting way, I think, in terms of writing. As I don't think we kind of got into the details, but you mentioned that in 1906, your jurisdiction's first history book came out, which I believe that was from past Grand Master William H. Parham and past Grand Master Jeremiah Brown, if I'm not mistaken. But then moving forward, you all actually had your second and third book, really your second book, which was printed in 2 editions, which I actually happen to have I have a first edition copy right here. I shouldn't even show y'all, but I like y'all out there. The first edition of the history of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Ohio, an epoch in American fraternalism, 1849 to 1860, written by none other than Dr. Charles Harris Wesley, which was republished in 1971. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about Dr. Wesley's impact on your jurisdiction. His history book. He was very active in your state. He was a member of Hiram Lodge Number 4 here in DC. But I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about Dr. Wesley's contribution to the historiography of Ohio, and and also can you kind of do some comparison between the previous books that have come out? I know it's kind of a mouthful, but you get my drift.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dr. Wesley has been instrumental in the history of Ohio. I mean, the two books that you pointed out this book is pretty beat up, falling apart. That's how much I reference it. And the book that you mentioned from 1960 is also one that I refer to a lot. I think he did just a fantastic job at putting together the overall history of our Grand Lodge and kind of really connecting the dots. I mean, again, there were a lot of things that I didn't know about my own personal lodge. So if you dive pretty deep into it, you can see that there's different things that he was able to do. But I think the impact that he had on the history of Ohio is unmeasurable. I mean, it really is. I mean, he was able to document a lot. The 1906 book being one of the first books is really just provides that insight from kind of the adolescent years, if you will. I mean, the 1906, we had only been around for about 50 or so years. So a lot of the history, unfortunately, was lost. I mean, our proceedings in Ohio from 1849 through, I think, 1854 or so, they didn't exist. We didn't have any proceedings. They were just the notes of the Grand Secretary at the time. And the next 5 years from there, I have not been able to find any of those proceedings. They've been lost in the wind. So if anybody, it's a shameless plug, if anybody has them, I am looking for them. But from about 1861 forward, we have a pretty well written history and proceedings and things of that sort. But you also have the book that Samuel W. Clarke put out in like 1885, 1886, I believe, which was not necessarily a book about Ohio. It was really about the equity of Negroes in Masonry. So there's been a long journey from Brother Clarke to Parham to Wesley that have continued to put out different things and update our history. And me, selfishly, I think that all Grand lodges as well should do at least every 10 years or so continue to update their history. And I think, when I first read Wesley's first book in 1960 and then looking at the 1971, I naively thought, he was just kind of updating that 10-year sprint. But I think there's some value in that 10-year mark to really continue to do that. I mean, you look at from 2013 through now and look at how many things this world has encountered, from pandemics to natural disasters to all kinds of things. So to me, the history of not just the Grand Lodges, but the subordinate lodges that make up the Grand Lodges is just as important as the Grand Lodge, because there's a lot of times brothers' names that are on these rosters that we don't get to tell their story. I've always been pretty adamant about, reading something early on that said, like, you die twice, right? The first time is when you take your last breath, and then the second time is when somebody speaks your name for the last time. So that's kind of been my personal motivation in reading brothers like Wesley's and the other books. When I pick up on a name that doesn't ring a bell, I start researching them. I tap into ancestry.com, shameless plug to that database, because I've been able to pick up a lot of photos and history from there to really just speak on brothers and kind of tell their story more. So to me, Wesley was like the one that is the pillar that kind of started some things and kind of sparked my interest in things. And again, I kind of just pick up on names and purposely start researching those names and see, okay, what did this brother do? Like, what did he actually do? Like, we all have a story. Is it worth telling that brother's story? Hopefully that answered your question, and I ain't go too far off track.
No, thank you. You definitely did. Thank you.
Yeah. So I know I'm looking at our comment section, and it's definitely jumping tonight. So I think we can answer some of these questions that that some folks are posing. And just to let everyone know, generally James does our behind the scenes and a lot of our admin and different things. This evening I'm taking care of that, but you best believe the next episode James will be back in charge of those things because it's a lot of work. So I appreciate you.
Oh no. If I'm going back to doing it, listen, I'll do it. But I want you to understand something, okay? The kids at home, listen to this. Yesterday's price.
I knew it. I knew that was coming.
Hey,
yesterday's
you know
price
what?
It's not tomorrow's price. I'm letting you know.
And here's a little think tank trivia too. That if I'm not mistaken, I can remember many years ago. I think James tried to give that duty up, or something happened where it was like, somebody else do it, and I think we subconsciously all ignored him, and he kept doing it every. You're so good at it, brother.
Right.
I feel James' pain. I think having to do it a couple times by myself, I understand.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's see if we can answer some of these questions, right, Worshipful Powell. So our first one is from Sister Hackett. In doing your research, have you come across any letters between William T. Boyd and Josiah Drummond?
Not off the top that I can remember, but that's a name that it sounds like I'm gonna have to research some more.
Okay. Next up, Brother Sean. Greetings, brethren. Any thoughts of putting our history books on tape or CD, narrated by the likes of Morgan Freeman or some other well-spoken brother? And I think that speaks to it speaks to what we were talking about earlier as far as the modern technology now, and a lot of people listen to instead of reading they want to listen to books. And I don't know, and there may be some out there. I don't know if there are any Prince Hall history books that are it's been put on tape. I'm sure there are, but any thoughts to that?
I nominate Damian Jack.
Yeah, he does have that smooth, nice New Yorkish voice. New York is somewhat,
And the funny and the ironic thing is that I have been questioned about putting my books on audio, so I'm actually looking into that just to see what type of work, the amount of work that's going to take to put that many books on audio. But I do think that, as we talked about in modern technology, it has to, we have to keep up with the times. I think one of the things that I have noticed, I'll speak personally, especially within the order, there are you'll have those members who don't like change. And I like to, tell people that, there are two things that are constant, in this life: time and change. And, either you're going to change or you're going to be changed. And the difference between the two is one of them you can control. So either you're going to keep up with the times. And I think the pandemic has shown that, where we had to, catch up with modern technology in order to keep this order moving. So So we have to get to the point where, if you think about it, in our time, it was we were going to libraries, we were going to, find these books. We knew the Dewey Decimal System and things like that. Now it's, libraries are, becoming a thing of the past. Libraries now are, here on our phones. It's very rare you have, people go to libraries. So it's like we have to move, on that matter. So it's going to be a point of not if, but when.
Brother Jack, on that note, I actually was. This is actually a good topic. I actually was approached years ago when my book first came out by a former classmate of mine about considering putting my book on Audible. I personally, I didn't do that, and the reason why was because I felt that my books, particularly, and I just didn't think that Grand Lodge Histories would, at least not the one that I wrote, would translate well to an audiobook. But then again, I'm not a big audiobook person either. I do think a book like books like the ones that you write, I think actually would translate better than what I wrote. So I think, I can't speak on the project that Brother Powell and Brother Caffey are working on, but I do think that there's a discussion there for any potential Masonic authors out there to definitely consider it from a cash flow perspective. But you have to be cognizant of, because it does take work to put a book out the normal way, and then to go back and have it, get the voice actors and do all that stuff. In my particular case, I didn't feel that it was going to be worth it, and I didn't think that the product was going to be good enough. Not because I don't like audiobooks, but because of my writing style. But again, that's a conversation for each project. Maybe my next project, my next go around, maybe I'll feel differently. Yeah, there's definitely something interesting to talk about.
But you know what? I kind of disagree with that, and the reason why I disagree, only reason why I disagree with it is this: if you look at the, all the books, not this, let's take, Prince Hall Masonic books out the way. If you look at all the books that are being published now, right? The majority of them, if not all of them, are going to audio books, and so it's not necessarily the style of writing, it's who's presenting it. Like Caff and Dave were talking about, and even the brother who posed the question, even though he may have been joking and saying Morgan Freeman, think about it, if you're riding, if you're riding along, if you have that voice that can keep your attention, on the book, it doesn't necessarily matter the type of book. It's how it's being presented. Now, if you have somebody, talking like Ben Stein from, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, yeah, it's going to put you to sleep. But if you have somebody who can bring that excitement the same way that you were excited to write it, and think about how your book has blossomed. So now, for those who can't necessarily, who have those busy schedules, because some of the brothers who have asked me if my books are on audio books, they're truck drivers. So if they don't, they can't just stop and read a book, but they can listen while they're on the road. So if you can imagine, somebody who has that type of voice and excitement to bring your book to life, it would still give that type of excitement just as a hardback or a paperback would. In the same way would be for, Grand Lodge history, because there are those who are, history buffs, just like everyone who is on this panel. And so if you get that right voice to bring it to life, I think it'll be a great addition.
So basically what you're saying is we should get Clifton Powell to do William T. Boyd and Keith David to do William D. Matthews. That's what you're saying? We should
absolutely. And like we got Dr. Jeff Menzies on the in the comment, shout out to Dr. Jeff. And he's saying he has a couple of his books that's being converted now and can, show it in the process. So, the resources are out there. We just have to, we always talk about that, the resources being out there. We just have to find the right people and place ourselves in the proper position to, to go out and do it.
Yeah, and we have to remember too, with AI technology now, It's to the point where you may not even have to necessarily get a person in a studio to record the book. With the different advances that are being made with like I said, AI technology. Some of these things may be easier than we think. But that's great question. Great question. Next up, we have I'm sorry. It's actually the answer to a question. We have another question from Sister Hackett. Could the fact that Ohio was an anti-slavery state contributed to Black men having a willingness to venture out more so than Black men in the South? And I believe Brother Blunt also, shout out to Brother Blunt, who's in the who's viewing this tonight as well. I think he also answered some of this in the chat. But what are some of brothers' thoughts around that? Could the fact that Ohio was an anti-slavery state contributed to Black men having a willingness to venture out more so than Black men in the South?
Well, I definitely think so. I'm sorry, Brother Powell.
Oh no, I yield to you.
Okay, well, I'll just be brief. I definitely think so. With Ohio being at the time, we today we don't think of Ohio as the West as it was, early in America's founding. But early in its history, though, Ohio was definitely like Western frontier. And so when you think about the river systems that flow through that area, the connection right there at Canada, right, as well. And then, of course, you just had some really intrepid brothers. I mean, I was reading somewhere in the comments. I think it might have been even that question. I mean, you think about the jurisdiction of D.C. where I am. The brothers didn't travel as much as Ohio did. We didn't. We didn't, because D.C. is an area you're surrounded in terms of the pre-Civil War years. But Ohio just had some brothers who were willing to go into slave and free territory. Many of these individuals end up becoming the prominent early grand masters of your Missouris and Kentucky and Kansas and all these different places. And we definitely have to give a shout out to the grand masters, but Ohio, I mean, the grand lecturers that you all had during the 19th century. I mean, Moses Dixon. I mean, if anyone knows just that one name alone, and the work he did while under the jurisdiction of Ohio. I mean, amazing, just simply amazing. No, I'm sorry, Brother Powell.
I would agree with you 100%. I think that that definitely played a role in it. I mean, Ohio, there's a lot of stuff here in Cleveland that's called the Western Reserve. And I remember early on, I used to think like, Western Reserve, like what is this stuff? But then when you realize that we're west of the East Coast, Ohio was a sought after place. Even if you fast forward to the Great Migration, I mean, the population of Negro, quote unquote, Americans in Ohio exploded. I mean, in the early 1920s, 1930s, it tripled and quadrupled in Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Toledo. I mean, the population really just expanded. So I think Ohio not being one of the slave states, if you will, was definitely something that made the brothers that were born in Ohio a lot more likely to travel and they can get around a little bit more. So I would definitely agree with you.
All right. And our last question this evening is from Brother Jackson. Very worshipful Ohio. Can you briefly talk about Ohio Prince Hall Masons and the Underground Railroad?
Yeah, there were a lot of brothers involved with the Underground Railroad in Ohio. I did some things a couple years back on some of the stuff with the Underground Railroad, and from Pennsylvania and Ohio, the connection with the Henderson family in Pennsylvania, and Cleveland, Cincinnati was definitely stopping grounds on that route, and even into Canada. But the Underground Railroad in Ohio was there's just a long list of names that we're actually affiliated with. And I mean, even to that point, when you're doing research one of the things that I find the most intriguing is, a lot of times we falsely think that we all came from slave ships, and that's where we all come from, right? But I know the first worshipful master of my lodge, Brother Weaver, his family was actually free in the United States as early as the 1710s. So you could actually do research on the Weaver family, and you'll see that 60, 65 years before this country was a country, the Weaver family was actually free in what we consider now the United States. So not just the Underground Railroad, but just in general, our history stretches way beyond that. I know one of the most proud things, and I think Brother Jack mentioned this earlier, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention this as another highlight, at least for me, is when I read the old newspaper articles and proceedings, and I see things like Eureka Lodge was actually in the processional when Abraham Lincoln's body actually came through the city of Cleveland, unfortunately, after his demise. So that by itself, I think, just shows the engagement and involvement. And believe it or not all Grand Masses or brothers were keen on brothers participating in things like that. So that's another thing that we have to be conscious of, is it was quite controversial at the time to put the fraternity, if you will, on the line like that. So there were some Grand Masters that were just not in support of doing that, but by majority, Ohio fully backed it. So the Underground Railroad, I could probably go on and on about Ohio's involvement, but we were definitely involved with the Underground Railroad.
All right. All right. So again, everyone, thanks for your great questions. As always, we love. I always say we have two shows going on at the same time. The show that we're presenting to you all, and then the show that's going on in the comment section. So sometimes that show is more livelier than ours. I think tonight we have some equal. It was equal on both parts. So again, thank you. So we want to end the evening tonight, as always, with our closing comments as we wrap everything up. And we'll start with our guest, Right Worshipful Powell. Any closing comments that you may have for us this evening, Brother Powell?
I would just say that first, thank you again, brothers, for having me on. It's truly an honor. I'm humbled to be here. I'm humbled that you would even invite me to such a platform. I have a great deal of respect for each of you, and I really like what you've done over the last 10 plus years. I mean, it's amazing to see what you've done to be able to bring us up to date all over the country. That as you can see in the chat, people look at this, and I know I even go back sometimes and look at some of the old episodes. I'm really just humbled to be here, and can't thank you enough for the invite. Hopefully you found some of the information fruitful.
Definitely, Brother Powell, and again, we can always tell, and I think I may have mentioned this too. Like we can always tell when a show is really, just it's popular. One, by not only the people that tune in, but the activity in the chat section, and then we look up, and a day or two later, the views. And one of our goals of the think tank was not only to produce content for today and right now, but to have something that brothers, sisters, and those who are interested in Prince Hall Freemasonry can look back on. So this will definitely go down as one of those episodes that we think will definitely garner a lot of views. So, Brother Jack, closing comments, good brother.
Yes, sir. To Right Worshipful Powell, thank you for being a guest on our show this evening. Thank you for the knowledge that you brought this evening. Like I said, there are definitely some things that you have taught me, and I definitely look forward to the book being released. I will surely get a copy if not through you, definitely through Brother Caffey or Brother Blunt. To our audience, as always, I thank you for the greatest gift that you could give us, which is your time, because that is something that you cannot get back. We always pray that you have enjoyed the show and has been influenced in some form or fashion by the information that we have bestowed upon you this evening. I want to give a shout out to Brother Morgan. I know he gave a lot of his well-deserved accolades at the beginning of the show. But I also want to give him another accolade. I think we talked about it earlier in the year. But my wife and I just came back from Charleston, South Carolina, celebrating Arabian Temple and Course joint ball. Congratulations to them. And before we came back, we had the opportunity to go to the International African American Museum. Definitely enjoyed the museum. Definitely great exhibits that were there, including the short film Seeking on the Gullah Geechee. Learned a lot about that. Saw your section on genealogy. And for those that don't know, Brother Morgan was instrumental in part of the development of the museum. So if you're ever in the Charleston area, please go visit the International African American Museum. It is definitely worth your while. So congratulations to you on that project that you have done, Brother Morgan. I want to take this time real quick to a side note. I know you see some of the shirts that we're wearing. First of all, I want to give a happy belated Founders Day to Brother Caffey and to the men of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. I want to give a belated happy Founders Day to the ladies of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated. Those were both in during this month of November. But December is coming. December is coming. Matter of fact, December is this Friday and the following Monday. You've heard the year mentioned a lot during this show, a special edition, that 1906 edition. Want to give a early happy Founders Day to the oldest, boldest, ice coldest fraternity in the world, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, 117 years. First of all, service of all, we shall transcend all. So I want to give a happy Founders Day early happy Founders Day to my high school brothers. Until then, please be blessed. Looking forward to seeing you at our next show, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Brother Jack. Brother Morgan.
Again, want to thank our distinguished guest, Brother Mario Powell, my good friend and brother. Always a pleasure to see you. Congratulations to you, Brother Blunt, Brother Caffey, and your entire team, and to the jurisdiction of Ohio, and producing yet another history book in your jurisdiction's history. I mean, I think that's an amazing feat, one that every other jurisdiction needs to emulate. And so I just cannot congratulate you all enough. I'm proud of each of you and glad to say that I know you. I want to thank everybody again for coming out and supporting us. We're going strong. We're still going strong here in the think tank, and I really want to thank everybody so much again for the support that you all have lent me. This season has been an interesting one for me as far as balancing everything. I mean, literally, folks don't know or don't realize I've been in school in Baltimore, but had a job in Charleston, South Carolina. So I've been going up and down the highways and byways of the great East Coast at a rate that a lot of folks really wouldn't believe, but I've been doing it. So I was very glad to see Brother Jack and his lovely wife were able to visit the museum. I want to thank everybody so much. When I was writing my thesis, I had to thank the Prince Hall Think Tank and all of you, the viewers, for your support. I could not do the work that I do without you all. Your prayers and your kind words really do fuel my fire. So I want to just thank you all, and I also want to thank those of you for those who are aware. My mother has been dealing with some medical issues recently, so I do want to thank you all for also providing your support with that, as well as particularly to the brothers here on this platform. Your prayers were also appreciated with that. Other than that, I want to wish everybody happy holidays. Let's have a safe holiday season, and so we can start to greet 2024 in a better condition than we greeted 2023. The jurisdiction of Ohio, you all definitely have exemplified manly deeds, scholarship, and love for all mankind. Happy Founders Day to the Ice Cold Brothers Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Thank you.
All right. And last but certainly not least, Brother Dave Gillar.
Well, first, just want to thank Right Worshipful Pal personally for everything that you've ever done for me. Anytime I've asked you for anything, you've always been right there. You, Brother Blunt, Brother Reggie, it's numerous brothers, but I definitely want to thank you. One of the things that I was tasked with was helping to write or compile the early history of what is now the Jesse Robinson Most Excellent Grand Chapter of Georgia, and I was able to do so with you all's assistance. And so, if you're all out there, you go to the website, you click from the beginning. One of the things that we found is Ohio chartered Royal Ark chapter in Columbus, Georgia. Prior to, we never knew that. We always believed that the all the chapters in Georgia were chartered by DC, but we found just one chapter that was chartered by Ohio, along with the commandery that was in Columbus, Georgia as well. So thank you all for that. With that being said, brothers out there that's researching, feel free to contact somebody else, help share your research. You'll know how much other information you'll be able to receive back just by talking and and sharing what you have with other brothers. We got some amazing researchers out there in the world, but nobody can do all the stuff by themselves. So if you got other projects that you're working on, feel free to share that information because people might be able to put in those missing pieces of the puzzle. And lastly, I don't have a Founders Day, but I do have my Knicks. So I don't know why y'all thought that I did all that serious talking and I wasn't gonna bring the Knicks back to this conversation. Y'all fall for that every time. I'm always gonna talk about the Knicks.
That is a t-shirt. But you need to get that put on a t-shirt. I don't have a Founders Day, but I have my Knicks. I'm gonna get that shirt made for you, bro.
Brothers, we gonna go to an MPHC meeting one day, and Dave is gonna be there with a table for the New York Knicks.
That is a classic, bro.
Yeah, but before we go, since you talked about what Ohio has done, Right Worshipful Pal, get ready because in the coming months we've been holding on to this for a while. We're getting ready to do the history of Knights Templar, so we're gonna be calling you in a little bit. We've been.
Yeah, and if you all haven't got this book, make sure you get your hands on a copy. This is an excellent book regarding Knights Templarism in Ohio, and it really helped me out with finding the commandery that I mentioned earlier that was here in Columbus, Georgia. So get your hands on that book, and that's all I got, Brother Cash.
All right, appreciate you as always, good brother. So again, thank you, Right Worshipful Pal, for being with us tonight. Thank you to all the other brothers, and thank you to our fabulous audience. Throughout many episodes that we've had, I've always considered the shows that we've done about the respective histories of our Grand Lodges to be some of my favorites. To hear about, and we talked about this earlier, to hear some of the stories of some of the brothers that created these institutions, that stood the test of time. The fact that we're still here hundreds of years later, still, talking about them and detailing the ordeals that they went through, and understanding the commitment that they made and that they had helps me understand the commitment that I have to have as a present day member. Because as the title of the show, we definitely stand upon their shoulders. At the saying, I often say this, we stand upon their shoulders. At the same time, we're making sure that our shoulders are strong enough so people can stand on our shoulders as well and can keep this thing going. So I urge other Grand Lodges and lodges, to continue to chronicle those histories, use that modern technology that we talked about earlier to continue to tell our story to the world. As always, thank you for joining us this evening. And let's remember, as always, to teach Masonry in our lodges. Have a great evening.